It's Monday, and that means another week of FreightWaves now. I'm your host, Anthony Smith, and coming up, Donny Gilbert's going to give us an update for the brokers. We also have Mike Baudendistel back with us with a Rail and Intermodal update. But first, we're going to go to Zach Strickland with the carrier update, brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, and welcome to your Monday Carrier Update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland, and today, of course, if you've been reading your FreightWaves.com and all the news, truckload volumes, of course, surging to near peak levels over the weekend. A lot of freight started popping late last week. We saw the outbound tender volume index surge over 10,900, which means it's roughly 9% higher than it was when the index was created on March 1st, 2018, when the market was supposedly in a lot of turmoil and disruption. So volume spiking to this level is not necessarily precedented in terms of anything that's not around a holiday. If you look at some of these peaks and valleys here, these are all peaks and troughs sitting right around holidays as shippers really start to push freight off their dock in preparation for being off and not available. So to see this right now in the middle of March when there's no necessarily holiday, it's obviously related to some form of coronavirus or economic impact that we're watching. So 10,900 value, really impressive to see at this time of year, especially right now when everybody was expecting freight volumes to really start to fall off the map because China's production levels are falling. So it's not necessarily related to any one specific market either, so it's all over the country. If you're looking at the outbound tender volume index for the various regions across the country, we've got the Southwest, Southeast, Midwest, Northeast, and West regions pulled up here on this chart. And you can see all of them have the same little tail right here. All of them showing, a decent little spike upward here over the last 5 to 6 days. The Midwest is the biggest section of the country, and it's starting to shoot up really rapidly. So all these areas of the country are very volatile right now. Tender rejection rates are also coming up across the country, not necessarily to peak levels, what we would normally see, in a June or a July type scenario, or even a Christmas where supply side stuff really falls off. But a lot of that has to do with the fact, like I said, supply side. So the trucks are not on the road. They're starting to contract their regions. They're not covering as much freight because they're trying to stay on home time, etc. March, this time of year, they're not necessarily staying off the road just yet. Now, that will be an interesting thing to watch here in the coming weeks. As the coronavirus spreads throughout the United States, we will start to see whether or not this does impact the supply side with any significance or not. So far, it is not just yet. So a 6.83 tender rejection index value for the van loads. Reefer not really peaking up just yet, but it is hovering right around 5% level right now. So I should say 10% level, not 5%, 10.12% level right now. And that is probably going to change here in the coming weeks as, of course, all of this, the panic buying and shopping has revolved around a lot of the grocery freight. But right now, this is mostly a dry van event. 6.83%, not necessarily what you would normally see in June, July, or even around Christmas holidays. So it's not necessarily one of those spot market events that you would be, seeing a lot of increased 15%, 20% margins on. But that is yet to be seen as volumes are still on the increase. If you look across the country, Maine, a lot of water up there in Maine. Tender rejection rates increasing. Cape Girardeau, right here in the middle of the country, starting to really peak up. And one market to watch as this really starts to unfold is the Ontario market. As I've mentioned in the past, tender volumes really starting to spike out of the Ontario market. A lot of DC activity out there. That's going to be some of the bellwether freight to watch, to see what's going to surge across the country. A lot of long haul volumes coming out of Ontario. Tender rejection rates as well coming up right around 5% right now. So again, check out Ontario, Southern California, see what's going on here, and then that's probably going to fall into the rest of the country. And that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Donny Gilbert, and for our brokerage update today, we're going to discuss the weighted rejection index. Now, Zach was just talking about how we've seen a lot of this increase and change in the markets from our market volumes, and as well as tender rejection rates. So what is a good way for us to go in and find these markets that are actually changing, the ones that are really moving up? And first, we want to start by showing you the Houston market. We're going to look at outbound tender market share and tender rejection rates. So here in blue, we have our outbound tender market share, 2.72 for Houston today. And our outbound tender rejection rates have jumped up to 6.14%. Now, when we calculate our weighted rejection index, we use the outbound market share, the 2.72, and we're going to multiply it by the change in this 1 week difference of our tender rejection rates here. So here you see over the last several days, tender rejection rates have been increasing in the Houston market, jumping up to 6.14%. So that's how we figure our weighted rejection index, and what we're looking for is these larger markets. We really want to see, it's hard to see when rates change in these larger markets, and this is going to be an index that's actually going to help point it out. So over the past few days, here is the WRI for Houston. You see it's gone from below 0 all the way up to 9.17. So this shows us that we see a lot of increase, rates are increasing in the Houston market here. On my right here behind me here, I have a list of today's rejection index, where we have Allentown, PA at 15.10, Harrisburg 14.14, down to Salt Lake City 7.42. We see a lot of these over 5, with an index over 5. 5 is what we get excited about. Now, to compare this to last week, over here on my right, your left, this is last week's, and the value, we had Denver at 6.89. That is the only market that was over a 5.0 yesterday. You see where Lexington, Kentucky 1.6, El Paso 1.35, Louisville 1.31. A lot of these top 5s are very, very low numbers. Now, compare that to today. We have Allentown 15, here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About 8 markets over 5.0, and of course several of them here in the 4s. So over this past week, as we've gotten into this scare by the coronavirus, we see a lot of markets have picked up because of the volumes that are starting to move it and capacity tightening. Going here to another map here, these are a lot of the markets with the WRIs over 5. Again, Allentown 15, Houston at 9.15, Ontario at 8.66, and Salt Lake City at 7.74. So pull up your WRI map, look at these top 10, 15 markets, and this is a good place to start your investigating for finding markets to reach out to today, tomorrow, and up your bids on these freight. And that'll do it for today's brokerage update.
Voices from every corner of the supply chain concerning all modes of transportation. From the world's largest logistics podcast network, this is what the Freight Tech Revolution sounds like. Freightcast presented by FreightWaves. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Rail and Intermodal Update. I'm here with Mike Baudendistel. Mike, one of the things I've seen lately in the last 24 hours has been a lot of impact to the oil and energy sector. What kind of impact is that having on Rail and Intermodal?
So it's really going to have a lot of impacts across the various revenue segments that the companies have. So if we take a look at this tree map, these are the different rail carload categories, and sort of across these categories, these are the most obvious would be petroleum products, which is up about 10%. It's been one of the few categories that's been higher year over year. That's not just crude oil, that's also various refined products. Chemical carloads has been a big one as well. Not only is oil prices way down today, but natural gas prices are down about 7%. So Henry Hub $1.63 or so. That really reduces North America's competitive advantage with things like chemicals, having that inexpensive feedstock. It's also, of course, a negative for coal because natural gas gets to even be more of a base load product to be used for the electricity generation. But outside of the obvious things, there's a lot of other categories too that are impacted by the industrial economy. Things like metals. We have primary metal products there, down 9%. I mean, those are the type of things that go into a lot of the construction of energy facilities. You see here crushed sand. That includes a lot of the frac sand. Now that's been down already because of the local sourcing of the frac sand. So really, there's a lot of different categories in rail because it is so industrial oriented that are going to be negatively impacted by lower energy prices. This chart goes into a little bit more detail just on petroleum carloads specifically back through 2008. And you see this has been one of the few areas of the rail carload traffic that's been a secular grower. And you see, the U.S. is in blue here. It's been more volatile. This peak here was during the wide crude spreads where there was all that crude by rail. But you've seen Canada really be, Canada's in green, Canada be a secular grower. And lately that's been, due to a lot of the development efforts in the tar sands, which, rail's even more important for those because it is so remote. There's been moving a lot of, piping and metals up there for construction of those products, moving down a lot of the oil. There's been delays in pipelines, so that's been, somewhat less competitive. So in Canada, it's really been a secular growth area. The lower energy prices has the potential to upend a lot of this, including, even exports of LNG and those things with the lower natural gas prices worldwide.
Gotcha. And what's this?
So this is trying to address a question that I frequently get on in intermodal when there is energy price fluctuation, and that is, is there going to be a huge amount of freight going from intermodal to trucking because, intermodal has about half the fuel surcharge as trucking, and that's one of the key reasons to use intermodal. I tend to think not. I think it's a little bit of a fallacy because I don't think supply chains change quite that quickly.
Right.
Most intermodal is on domestic intermodal at least is on a 1-year contract, and they tend to not move with changes in oil. Maybe that impacts longer term planning, and then really the other reason is that most intermodal is concentrated in a few dense lanes. You hear 70% in 10 lanes. Those type of statistics. And so what we have in the sonar chart in blue is intermodal spot rates. In green, trucking spot rates. The trucking spot rates doesn't include fuel surcharge, so that's why it's about a dime lower per mile. But in any event, what this illustrates is a very competitive market domestically between domestic intermodal and truckload. That's not going to change, and it's still going to be a competitive marketplace out there.
Gotcha. So competitive marketplace still. The other thing that really kind of spoke to me just now is that there's going to be ripple effects, right, from the industrial segment, when we're seeing even a lack of construction for these facilities that are going to really house and really be impacted by the energy sector. Also, the effects from one of the only shining stars within the segment is also a very crucial point, especially after we just kind of gotten over those protests, right? So it's almost like one thing after another for this industry.
Exactly, at least on the volume side of things. So it makes it so the rail industry is going to pull even more levers in terms of trying to do those volumes with fewer employees, with fewer resources, with fewer capital expenditures, because that's really the main lever that they have at this point.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you so much. Insightful as always, and thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to do for this Monday edition of FreightWaves Now, but the content doesn't stop here. Check us out on all your favorite streaming platforms, including Apple TV. Check out our FreightWaves TV app. Also, if you're looking for deeper insights on all the latest industry trends, check out our Passport program, where you get access to all of those special reports. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.